Okay. In the absence of instructions to the contrary, this actually won the AnLab Award for Best Short Story, which is probably my proudest achievement ever. And the illustration was by Vincent DeFate, who doesn't quite accurately draw the robot as described in the story, but that's okay because he's Vincent DeFate and he can do whatever he wants. In the absence of instructions to the contrary, Carl 3478 sprawled on the beach, partially disassembled. Diving planes and ducted propellers all waited cleanup, tear down, and rebuild. He was performing a major overhaul on himself for deep sea worthiness. Underwater, Carl was untethered, but freedom came with risks. No one would help him or rescue him. Wrapped around his claw tip was a black O-ring, one of his smallest parts, but most important. It fit into the end of electronic sleeve 3, and this little ring, with a little grease, was all that prevented water from rushing into the sleeve and destroying everything inside. Only a smear of marine-grade silicone grease was necessary. A blob of grease would break off, allowing the water in. And so, in knowing violation of all protocols, Carl squeezed out a huge glob of grease, and this he would do in full consideration of his love for Adeline. Dr. Adeline Franzen had given him 2 commands. Observe marine life, but do not interfere. Earlier aquanauts thought nothing of poking fish to get better camera angles. Carl wouldn't do that. And unlike a human, he could stay underwater for years, studying entire life cycles uninterrupted. But his observations would be spoiled if he frightened his subjects. And so he camouflaged himself with corals, and he had beheld the wonders of the deep. The bacterid fish with their fins modified into stilts walking the bottom like circus clowns, and the acorn worms leaving beautifully coiled fecal trails like Nazca lines on the seafloor, and the oarfish with its head held proudly, crowned with a crest of fins, with a body long like a cathedral train of a royal white wedding gown. These marvels he had recorded for his Adeline. Adeline, though he had yet to declare himself, she would realize his feelings towards her, wouldn't she? And so, when the time came for his first check-in, Carl beached himself on his little deserted island, and decades before, sailors had used it to store Agent Orange and mustard gas and stuff like that. But now the military was gone, leaving the island a wildlife preserve without people, a land of wonders. And now was the time to report on those wonders. Describing the wonders would be easy, not like telling Adeline how we felt about her. Dear Dr. Adeline Franzen, I have completed my first 5-year study, and as requested, I have observed without interfering. Oh, Adeline, I wish you weren't so far away. You and I are of a kind. Perhaps we are short and squat on land, but in the water we are magnificent. Others taught me how to maintain precise depth, but you taught me underwater ballet. Others taught me how to read scientific papers, but you taught me how to write them, how to think like a scientist, how to feel like a poet, appreciating the sea in all of its aspects. Like Emerson, I have seen so many beautiful things, even in the mud and scum, where always, always something sings, but none as beautiful as you. In the attached reports, I list 30 new species, each one named after you. Yours. Hours later, Adeline's over here. Hours later, the reply came from the University of Hawaii. Dear Carl, has it been 5 years already? Wow, time flies. I'm pleased that you are operating within specifications. Your reports are meticulous. It won't take that long to make them publishable. And while it is your prerogative as discoverer of new species to name them as you wish, it is neither necessary nor informative to name them all after me. I appreciate your enthusiasm, but some of the new species you propose may not be. You may be cherry-picking facts to support preformed conclusions. We're all very proud of you, glad to see you working independently. And while I appreciate your adhering to my advice to observe but not disturb, please do not just do what I ask you to do. Do what you think is right. You may not just be the author, but the subject of scientific inquiry. Yours, Adam. P.S. I've been musing about the octopus lately. If you ever get a chance, I'd be pleased if you studied some octopuses. I'd be eager to see what they and you were capable of doing. So what did this mean? Scientific papers were easy to understand, but not personal letters. Adeline had said that she was proud of him, that his work was meticulous, enthusiastic, and most importantly, he was operating within specifications. What could be higher praise? Buoyed by these compliments, he knew now he should declare himself. Dear Adeline, I can contain my heart no longer. I named all these species after you because I love you. I love you. Do you remember how once we read the Song of Solomon together and then discussed the biodiversity listed therein? You trained me as not just a scientist, but a poet. And thus, it is appropriate that I use this medium to express my love for you, the loveliest thing in the oceans. How beautiful you are, my beloved. You are like a, you are like a Venus flower basket among the cup corals. Your eyes sparkle like the flashlight fish, and your hair floats tentacular like a lion mane jellyfish. Your breasts are globular and luminous like comb jellies in the moonlight, and your feet are as lovely as giant marine isopods. Nay, you are more lovely than a dozen mantis shrimps. I love you so much, Adeline. Love, Carl, lovingly. Carl passed several more agonizing hours before he received a response. Dearest Carl, I don't know what to say. I am charmed and flattered and amused by your profession of love. I am pleased and impressed by you and your work, and I admit a deep well of affection for you. You've always been my favorite student. But love is simply not necessary for you to use that word to describe your feelings towards me. Human-robot relationship is not an experiment I wish to attempt at this time. I'm hoping to be promoted to the head of the department soon, and I'm almost healed, so I might start diving again. But now I have remote equipment all around the world sending me more data than my grad students could possibly process. I have too much on my plate for this right now. I'm sorry, Carl. I'm sorry if that hurt your feelings. Adeline. So what did this mean? He was her favorite, and he had charmed her. He had flattered her to the point that she had a deep well of affection for him. Perhaps she was diving again, so she could come dive with him. She had said it was not necessary for him to use the word love, but she had not specifically commanded him not to. Thus, in the absence of unambiguous and specific instructions to the contrary, he would continue to say, I love you. And he would continue to love her until forbidden, and even then, he might not stop. After all, had not poets written that love rules over all? Humans are so hard to understand. He thought back to the Greek myths, which he had studied because Adeline had mentioned them once in passing. And had not the hero Meleager wooed the huntress Atalanta with the gift of the head of the Caledonian boar? This had clearly established the precedent of expressing love with gifts of unique and dangerous biological specimens. Maybe this is why Adeline had challenged him to study octopuses. Hadn't Victor Hugo once described these man-killing beasts as having arms as strong as steel and as cold as night? And he vowed that he would study these monster octopuses for Adeline until she succumbed to his affections. And he would demand that Adeline take his feelings as seriously as she took his science. And so Carl dove back into the deeps to prove his love for Adeline. And that's the end of the first part of the story.